Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's live Tech Talk. What keeps IT pros up at night, addressing key risks and building resilience. This event was organized by the hardworking folks at Redmond Channel Partner and Microsoft Certified Professional. And it's sponsored by Syncro, provider of an all-in-one professional services automation, remote monitoring and management, and remote support solution designed to help MSPs streamline operations, run their businesses efficiently, and provide their customers with world-class IT services. I'm John K. Waters, Editor-in-Chief of the Converge 360 Group of 1105 Media, and I'll be your moderator for what promises to be an information-packed conversation with an amazing panel that includes Jonathan Holt, Director of IT at Continental Automotive Group, Elliot Adler, Director of Information Technology at Medrite Urgent Care, and Dan Meserly, Senior Manager of Cybersecurity and IT at Nextern. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
We have a lot to get to in this next hour, but before we get started, I need to do just a bit of housekeeping. This Tech Talk is being recorded for later access. Keep an eye out for an email with a link to that recording. It'll be coming your way in the next few days. Our sponsors provide some extra resources that you won't want to miss. They're available now on your console. And at the end of this conversation, we'll have a 5 to 10 minute Q&A. Please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A box at any time. We'll do our best to get to all of them. Now, let's meet our panel. Let's start with Jonathan. Jonathan, tell us a bit about yourself and your company.
All right, thank you for having me on. My name is Jonathan Holt. I've been in the IT industry for about coming up on 12 years. Took a role as Director of IT for an automotive group out of Austin, Texas. We have about 8 dealerships, various brands. And I manage about 1,030 employees and have a team of about 15 people. Well, we have 22 technicians on Syncro, but we have about 15 people that I manage.
Glad to have you, man. Elliot, tell us about yourself and your company.
Sure. My name's Elliot Adler. I've been in the IT space for a couple of years now. I started my first IT job right after the Y2K hype. I worked in the wholesale retail verticals in the past. Currently, I'm working for a company called Medrite Urgent Care, where we have approximately 30 urgent cares based in the New York, New Jersey, Florida regions. We focus on bringing quality health care without the wait times. As our slogan says it all, save time, feel better.
Okay, Dan, what about you?
My name is Dan Messerly. I work for Nextern. We're based in Minnesota. We're contract manufacturers of medical devices. I've been in IT about 25 years, and I've been in this position about 3 years.
Awesome mix. This is a great panel. Welcome all. As you folks know, I just want to do a little setup here. Internal IT pros are navigating complex and ever-changing environment full of challenges that demand strategic action. I'm talking about everything from cybersecurity threats and compliance risks to operational inefficiencies, economic pressures, and we're going to dig into all of that today with what promises to be a very knowledgeable panel. Let's start with a core question. What are the biggest threats IT professionals face today? And let's go ahead and start. With Dan.
Okay. Yeah, I'd say in my network environment, we have a 100,000 square foot warehouse in the U.S. with roughly 200 end users. So the stuff that affects me is probably inside threats would be the first thing. Untrained users. That's something that I can directly affect. IT misconfigurations. That's probably number 2. And I guess number 3 would probably be shadow IT. Departments that go out on their own and don't ask for help, and then they ask for help when they're in trouble. So that's probably my top 3, right?
How about you, Elliot?
I feel like I'm in a box. You're getting squished on all sides. Someone like Dan saying, obviously cybersecurity is hitting you. Outsiders are hitting you. Insiders. John, to quote one of your other panelists on your last webinar, is we could build a 6-foot wall, but they're going to come with a 7-foot ladder to get over it. We got to put as many roadblocks as we could to prevent the bad actors from coming in. Whether it's internal, external, we just got to put up those barriers and create those roadblocks.
Jonathan, how about you?
We're seeing, a lot of the things we try to use to protect ourselves being used back against us. So one of the things we're worried about is AI, actually being used to exploit vulnerabilities within our network and within our employees. Things that used to have to be done manually can now be done by AI, and that makes like a phishing email a lot more effective when it doesn't have any errors on it, and it comes very conversational, and it has all the right logos, and it can be deployed instantly, without any human having to do anything, and as well as employee education. That's one of the biggest things that we're focusing on right now.
So I'm wondering about maybe I want to start with Elliot on this question because you started to answer it. How do you leverage technology to keep up with these, evolving threats? AI. I mean, it's a scary world out there. What do you do?
The only way we can handle layered defenses. There's no one tool. There's no one pocket knife that's going to solve everything. You got to build those layers. And so use good etiquette, good firewalls, good MFA. Zero trust, all back to the basics. And this is something where I believe Syncro helps us a lot with the patch management, the application reports. Now with their new network scanning, we can see what assets are really showing up on the network, what people are adding. Again, we're spread out between 30 different locations, can't be everywhere, anywhere at the same time. Just a matter of sitting here in the headquarters and watching what's going on is the key.
How about you, Dan? How are you leveraging technology to keep up with this amazing onslaught of bad actors?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't have a gigantic IT staff, right? So the tools have to do a lot of work for me. I use a lot of scripting and monitoring and automated alerting to, let us know what's going on. And I guess, somebody had mentioned AI. We have an antivirus that has some built-in AI. So, it can kind of track behavior changes. So machines are always going to do better at monitoring 24/7 and finding repeatability. So we kind of leverage programmability where we can there and, automate what we can for sure.
Jonathan?
Similarly, we use a lot of automation. We are enrolled in CrowdStrike Falcon, EDR, which constantly is monitoring for anything that's out of the normal. We pen test ourselves. Most of what we do is actually required by the FTC now. Automotive industry has been under a pretty big change in the last few years, as we are now recognized by the government as basically the same as a bank. And before that,
wow.
That wasn't the case. So because we facilitate loans just like a bank, the automotive industry is now having to live up to GLBA and the FTC safeguards. And so in order to do that, you have to have EDR, and you have to train your employees once a year. And you talk about an industry that doesn't want to do that one time a year training. I mean, it has been a major culture shift around here.
Wow. Okay, let's dive into some specifics about, well, let me put it this way. We'll start with Dan. What would you say are the top security threats that are currently seeing in your environment?
Probably day-to-day, the stuff that comes up is a lot of phishing, right?
A lot of phishing?
The emails, emails come through and they're better. Like Jonathan was saying, the bad guys are using AI to write these emails. So we have to use AI to train our people, right? You got to fight back the same way they're fighting, right? And then through those phishing attacks, they try their ransomware. So you have to have ways to block that or roll it back. And yeah, for me, it comes back to training all the time, because it's the people that make mistakes more often than not. So if they're aware of it and thinking about it, then we have a better chance at not making those mistakes.
I mean, you get an email
jump in here.
I'm sorry.
It's just amazing. Sorry. It's amazing how many people could fall for a scam. Of sending $500 worth of Apple gift cards. You think people would be a little more what's the word for it? But a little more cognizant. If they get an email from CEO, I'm out of cash. Could you get me $500 worth of Apple gift cards?
Yeah. Well, what do you do if the email looks like it came from the boss? I mean, Right.
How many
You
bills
gotta-
are asking for $500 in gift cards because he doesn't have his wallet with him today? Yeah.
Right. What's the is phishing the biggest cybersecurity threat you're facing, Elliot?
It's definitely a big one there. Especially we are housing patients' PII, patients' personal information. We do get, as saying AI written emails asking for patient records. We've had phone calls come in to some of our sites,
Wow.
posing as doctors. Obviously, unless we get it a fax, because fax is still the HIPAA compliant way of getting communication. We're not going to release anything. But again, phishing is definitely huge, and you're only as good as your weakest link. So
Right.
Using outside vendors, you have to hold everybody accountable in this day and age.
Jonathan, what are the top security threats you guys are seeing in your industry?
Similarly, I mean, phishing emails are oddly enough. I mean, I come from the MSP space before I joined this team, and phishing emails were just. I mean, it was like a full-time job. I remember telling my team, like, guys, we can't reply to every ticket we get about a phishing email. Like, we've got to train people to just mark these things as phishing and move on. We don't get that many of those yet. So I've pretty much been trying to train everybody to get ready for it, because I think anywhere there's money, that's where we start to see phishing emails. We see a good amount of malicious websites that are just public, and you can accidentally end up on them, or links are sent in malicious emails that are not necessarily trying to gain your credentials, because we're seeing them to be less valuable as MFA is being ramped up. Like, for instance, if you look at Google and M365, which are the two largest cloud-based email platforms, I mean, both of them are pretty much requiring MFA to have an account. And so it's really helping to kind of limit the danger of phishing emails. But those websites that get sent where you have an employee who's trying to, like, for me, follow a lead, right, to sell a car, and they're like, hey, I'm going to send you my driver's license through this encrypted link, and so here goes my salesperson. They're going to follow this link and go download this file and try to unzip it and try to run it. And it's like, what are you doing, man? You're trying to sell a Honda here. Why are you opening a Trojan like ransom thing on your computer, And so malicious websites are a big deal. And then, I think it's still cybersecurity because it comes via email, but we're seeing other breached email accounts that are actual real email accounts. They're not like a not like a spam email, but like someone at another dealership wants to sell us a car. And, we actually had a situation where we bought a car from a bad actor and had to, and wired the money. And then it was, it was like real loss, right? And we got most of the money back. But at the end of the day, it's like, whoa, guys, like, these are real people. They're just as smart as you and I, and they're really scamming us. And, we've got to, basically, I always tell my employees, if it feels a little strange, just stop and ask a question. Like, and back to what we talked about a minute ago, I think a top cybersecurity threat these days is bad leadership. You mentioned the COO that sends the email, right? Well, if that COO is not approachable and employees don't feel comfortable asking if he or she is really emailing them, then that COO is one of the biggest threats your company has. Because they are we call them whale targets, right? They're the big fish that is unapproachable. And then here comes the order to do something. And sure enough, no one feels comfortable. So I always try to tell, our leadership teams here, like, you've really got to be a welcoming person so that when there's something that happens, our employees are not afraid of you. You know what I mean? Like, the more drill sergeant you act, the more dangerous you are to our company.
Oh, man.
That's such a great point.
It really is. And a tough challenge.
It really is. Yeah, you have to.
We're talking about personalities here,
Well,
so
and
I'm sorry, go ahead.
We have an emerging workforce that is, I'm reading a book right now called The Anxious Generation, and they've spent more time not face-to-face. They've spent more time on email and social media and things like that. And that is our workforce that's coming up. So we have to make face-to-face comfortable for them. Like, that's super important. because the more digital we are, the more dangerous things are.
How do you do that? How do you make face-to-face more comfortable?
Well, sometimes you have to train your leaders on something they're not used to.
Yeah.
I think training for leadership teams in communication is going to be a really big focus as we bring the Gen Z folks into the workforce, because it's our job to be available to communicate the way they need to communicate, because quite frankly, we're on our way out and they're on their way in. So, we're the ones that need to be accommodating that.
Let me start my next question for Elliot, because there's so much at stake for you. I'm wondering about ransomware and how it's evolved over the last year. I know that the bad actors are using AI, and it's, it seemed like we were getting on top of it for a while there, but now it's getting more sophisticated. How are you preparing for it?
Again, it all boils down to education. It all, again, is the folks that are getting the emails are the first ones that have to have their antennas up. But again, it's all the technology, is using threat intelligence and SIEMs and all correct information tools, which don't have to be costly, but they have to be in place and set up correctly to alert you.
Is ransomware top of mind concern for you, Dan?
Yeah, it is. We haven't had any like events or anything like that, but like we're talking about how email is the way that it gets in, right? So we use, I guess the same things probably everybody uses. The URL in our email is proxied, right? So that if it is a bad link, they can't go straight there, right? Something will stop them first. You try to safeguard as much as you can with technology, and then, like we say, layer in the training, and we're talking about AI getting in there too. It's the same thing over and over, right? AI is making it smoother, making it less detectable. So we have to use some of that same technology to fight back against it.
What strategies are you using, Jonathan?
Education, not to, say the same thing over and over, but, educating employees is going to be absolutely paramount to prevent that. But some of the more technical stuff that we've noticed has to do with actual IT, more IT related systems. For instance, like a lot of VMware ESXi servers don't have antivirus on them, and they haven't historically. And so again, we're not dealing with the people who are trying to tell you that your uncle left you $20 million. We're dealing with really smart people, and when they know that there's a vulnerability like that, they're more likely to really spend their time and energy to focus on that. And so, what happens is they end up encrypting at the VMware level, and it ransoms groups of servers at the time instead of one system or one server. And so, really the only thing you can do is keep everything up to date, keep all the security patches automated, and then have someone specifically QCing that to make sure it's done correctly and make sure everything checks out, and have logs of all of that. And then, pretty much be ready at any time to restore data from, we use Druva to back up all of our data so that if ransomware happens, it can't slow us down. We're a company that makes, I think, around $3,000 a minute. And so an average ransomware attack is 19 days to restore. And, there's some proof of that, and some things that have happened in automotive in the last year. So, that's how we do it: backups and keeping everything up to date.
So you guys are also facing a regulatory sort of environment these days. I'm wondering how you stay compliant with the evolving regulatory requirements. Like I'm thinking GDPR, HIPAA, or CCPA, and this seems like a logical question for Elliot.
Sure. It's definitely something that keeps us up at night. These regulations, if you sit there reading the regulations, you can definitely fall asleep. But it's a matter of, keeping up to date, knowing what's out there, attending webinars. We definitely have teams that we use, and compliance, officers that we just, again, it's all the communication between the different teams.
I can go next here.
Yeah.
Staying compliant. So I'm in the medical device industry, right? A lot of compliances. Probably our top compliance body that we work with is FDA, and we have to get things, just right to pass their audits. And the other thing is we have a lot of different customers. So depending on the customer, that will dictate what compliance is. And so back to the FDA, their cybersecurity stance is pretty new, right? We haven't been jamming computers into catheters, for that long, but they're doing it now. And so they don't have all this, decided. They don't know what we should be doing. So we kind of have to, our company has to look ahead, see what Europe's doing, see what California's doing, then it'll come to Minnesota, right? That's usually the path. So we have to read ahead and be able to, almost guess what's going to be next. And I guess being in a good security hygiene, a good posture, will get us ready for that. And we're always, waiting for the next customer to require like a high trust or SOC or ISO, certification. So that's kind of at the level we need to be ready for these compliances.
So I slipped off for a little bit there, lost my internet connection. So did we ask Jonathan about regulatory compliance?
Well, this this is quickly in the automotive industry. This is quickly like spiraling. It started in the last couple of years with the FTC and GLBA, kind of like I mentioned. We're seen as like a financial institution. Since then, one of the largest vendors in the automotive industry, which is called CDK, was ransomed last June. Took them down for 2 weeks, maybe more. 15,000 automotive dealerships across the United States were not able to work. I don't know if anybody here ever went to a dealership during that time, but there were stores that actually had signs on the door that were like, "We can't do business." And so now we're starting to see regulatory requirements and compliance from the actual brands. So the first one for us is Mercedes. They're basically saying, well, if you want to be a Mercedes franchise, you're now going to have to live up to these standards that are sub FTC, right? FTC's here. And so we have 8 different brands. And so pretty soon we could be in a compliance nightmare where every brand has its own flavor of compliance requirements. But it all really is for good. And that's what, that's what we try to tell our employees who are kind of getting beat up by this, which is this is to protect our customers' data, protect their identities and their financial well-being. And so, we're doing it because we want to be good stewards to our, our patrons.
What would you say, Jonathan? I think you kind of just answered this question, but I'm going to ask you anyway, just in case. What strategies are the most effective for mitigating data breach risk? You've talked about, training to stop phishing. Probably even social engineering. Is there anything else you're doing?
Well, one of the ones that we're looking at, one of the strategies that we're looking into, and we're going to have to follow it, is called NIST. It's a framework, and inside of that is something called principal of least privilege. And if you haven't looked into POLP, of course, everything in IT is an acronym, right? If you haven't looked into POLP, what it does is it helps you to recognize the fact that a company is started by someone, and as it grows down, naturally the person at the top has the most access. And as that company grows and matures, the access that the person at the top really needs is less and less because they have delegates that are doing things for them. And so POLP says, let's give access to the person that needs it the least, principle of least privilege. And that's just one of the strategies that we use for, mitigating data breach is we make sure that if you don't need it to do your job, no matter if you're the CEO, the COO, the president, whoever you are, if you don't need it every day, then we make sure you don't have access to it. And as an IT director, I'm not a domain administrator at our group. I could be if I needed it. I could ask somebody to give it to me, but following POLP means that I'm also following that myself and saying, hey, I don't actually need this every day. I have people that do this. So take it away. And now my account is less, I guess you could say dangerous.
Vulnerable, yeah.
Vulnerable, yeah.
How about you, Elliot? Most effective mitigating strategies for mitigating data breaches?
Again, an ounce of prevention is definitely a pound of cure, staying on brand. But as a vice president used to constantly stress, the failure to plan is to plan to fail. You got to be planning. You always got to be looking at what's coming up down the road and put as many safeguards in place. So, you don't fall, prey to these breaches.
Hmm. Dan?
Yeah, I guess for me, probably align maybe more with Elliot. We have a good risk assessment, right? Like, what are our real issues? Where could we really be breached? What is seriously somewhere that could be broken in? You can't protect against everything, right? So you have to prioritize what you're going to go after. And, back to the education, we'll keep beating that drum, right? People are usually where issues leak in. So education, education, education. We do monthly 5-minute video training for every employee just to keep it top of mind every month and keep educating. Yep.
This is always kind of a tricky question, but so I'll go to Jonathan first. Can you share an example of a recent close call or incident and what you learned from it?
Yeah, we have a perfect one. I mentioned it earlier. CDK is a very old company. I would say their security posture is not the most up to date, the most advanced. And to use their systems, you actually have to pay for their networking equipment to be installed in your dealership, and it gives them a direct access into your network. So if you can imagine when CDK was ransomed, and them having direct access into our dealerships networks, yeah, we were very worried, and we immediately cut off the connection to CDK and left it off for a number of days, if not actually, I think more like 2 weeks. And what we learned is that although they appreciated having wide open access to our network, they didn't actually need it. Again, principle of least privilege kind of situation. So what we did is we locked down that connection, and we only allow certain devices on the allow list to talk. For instance, their printers can talk to CDK, and their networking equipment can talk to CDK, but they don't have sort of wide open access anymore. But they did before that situation. So we learned a lot from that, and we got lucky. And I would say 14,999 other dealerships in the United States got lucky as well.
Wow, that's a good one. How about you, Elliot? Any, close calls you want to share?
So we definitely had a close call. We had a vendor, the company name ends in a W. We started getting emails from a similar domain that had the same domain name, just ended in a VV. So by when you glance at it, it definitely looks like a W. One of our AP reps actually reached out to me, telling me that this vendor, was actually an IT vendor, was actually getting very arrogant on the emails, asking for payment, and it was actually structured very well. They were asking for payment information, not account numbers, but just when the invoice can be paid, but very vague. And she's calling me up like he's rude, asking for invoice information. So I ended up calling up the sales rep directly because again, that definitely raises a red flag. I picked up the phone and called him, which is always the key. Get on the phone, hear the person's voice, and when I spoke to my rep, he was on vacation. So obviously they had some type of cyber event, but our eagle-eyed AP rep actually picked up on it and really saved the day there. So then we obviously put in, you have to, if you don't react to a situation like that, then you're foolish. We obviously have to put policies in place, so it's not repeatable, but thank God, there was no ill outcome from it, but it could have been pretty bad.
Dan, any close calls you want to share?
Yeah, I guess you could call it a near miss. Every year we work to have, interns, right? Interns in the summer from colleges, and they work with us, and they're always very motivated to get work done. And I had an intern put in a help desk ticket that said, I had this block of data and I put it into this AI engine online and it didn't work right. What can we do? I thought, oh no, right? So it wasn't customer data. We were okay. But what it highlighted for us was that we need to show the AI policy to the interns too. We had a policy, but it's no good if they don't know about it, right? And make sure that they're doing their training, because it gets assigned, but the managers don't always follow through and make sure that they're doing their training. So they need to be very aware of, our stance on customer data and what you can and cannot do with that.
So speaking of AI, how are you guys leveraging automation or AI to reduce repetitive tasks in your IT operations? Maybe start with Elliot.
So again, AI is a wonderful tool, dangerous as well. You have to be very careful what goes into it. But again, our antiviruses are definitely leveraging it, looking for trends. That's where I think AI really strives, is looking for trends, looking for things that are out of the norm. Do I think it's going to take over the humans and we're all going to become robots? No. I think, for AI to be really effective out there, I think we're years to come for that. But again, it's definitely there to help us. It's a tool that you have to be extremely careful with. But again, use it for what it's good at. Looking for trends, looking for abnormal data, looking, for information like that.
How about you, Jonathan? How are you guys using AI? And
AI is mostly used for research at this point. It's kind of a better version of what we would used to call Google, right? You Google it. I don't know what we're going to call it now. AI it? That doesn't sound, I guess Chat GPT it or something, or what are the other ones from Twitter? But I think that we use a lot of automation. And of course, automation is it's something to help with labor costs, quite frankly. Using PowerShell to automate task and user creation and employee departures. We even use it to reboot devices on schedule, to monitor their online statuses. And we also use an automated product to restrict admin, but then not basically make it so every person has to have IT come in and put in a password to install updates and things like that. In the automotive sector, we have these cars that are now computers, and those computers in those cars need updates a lot. And so these various brands will have these updates roll out like every 2 weeks, and those things need admin credentials. So we use this software called Auto Elevate, and it basically allows the end user. We have 1,030 employees currently, so it's nice to request to update something, and then on the IT side, we get a ticket and we can approve it. We can approve it with rules like, hey, only this computer, or you can approve it and say, actually, this is safe for everybody. And then the next person that runs it just immediately gets approved for it based on the signature that the update has. So that's a very helpful automation that we've put in place that's really scaled our labor hours to where we can be focused on things and not just constantly be putting in admin passwords and doing remotes for admin.
Dan, how are you guys leveraging automation or AI to reduce your repetitive tasks?
Sure. So like we had mentioned already, kind of the AI integrated with the antivirus. That's like the day-to-day ongoing scanning. For my department specifically, we use AI to summarize large documents. Every IT guy has the 1,000-page manual he needs to go through, right? So AI can summarize that. And then for communications to the company, we write very technically because we're technical people, and we'll write out this summary, and then AI will tell us, oh yeah, normal people can't understand that, so soften it here and here, and we use it for those kind of tasks.
Okay. I'm wondering about operational efficiencies. Maybe Dan, how do you guys, what do you see as the greatest opportunity, I guess I could say, to reduce operational inefficiencies through technology?
For IT specifically, I'd say scripting is what saves us the most time. We have like 250-ish employees in the US, and then that many again worldwide. And if we had to go to every single desktop to perform a duty, it would take forever. So scripting for us. And then within the company, we manufacture medical devices, right? And every medical device has to have a label on it. And the requirements of those labels are, wildly varied from customer to customer. And what we're finding is the people cost to make sure those labels are right is very high. And if we have a high volume, we can't keep up no matter how many people you throw at it. So we bring in, automation or maybe even AI to look at those labels, make sure they're right, make sure they're accurate, and record that they were placed. So company-wide, that's probably what we would do.
So no more sneaker wear, right?
Yeah, a lot less, right?
How about you, Elliot?
Scripting is definitely the key. We recently had a big city project we had to roll out. If I remember correctly, it was 75 laptops. Of course, these are always last-minute notifications. This is actually somewhere where Syncro helped us, because we have built over time immense amount of scripts, for all the software that we use, and to restrict the computers down to obviously almost kiosk mode. And I honestly, having a small team, we actually pulled the receptionist out and said, "This is how you run the Syncro installer." And honestly, using the automation and the scripting, really, we were able to execute the project without being here till midnight. I really don't like the Manhattan skyline at midnight.
How about you, Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, this particular question, I don't think there's. I'm trying to think aside from what I just kind of talked about with the Auto Elevate kind of software, and scripting and automation using AI to do things that take long periods of time. I mean, really, the crunch for us is just delivering a world-class IT product, right? Experience for our end users that is safe and that is sort of always thinking about cybersecurity with like just a few people. I mean, you can't afford, a massive team. So you really have to utilize all the technology and automation and AI, because you'll just drown yourself in expense basically. And so, I mean, that's scripting, automation. Syncro is great for us. We use their scripting library, and then our system admin is also a scripting whiz. So he kind of does his own thing sometimes too. So it's a little bit of both.
One of the things I hear a lot about these days, actually for the past few years, is tool sprawl. Maybe start with Dan. I'm wondering what advice you would give to IT teams struggling with tool sprawl.
Sure. Yeah. And in my previous job, right, I worked at an MSP too, and there was a million tools you had to master, right?
Yeah.
When I'm, in the private market and I need to maintain all the tools myself, the tools need to integrate. If they're all these separate silos, there's no way that I'm going to get into every tool every day and make sure it's working correctly, or create or take out user accounts quickly enough. So I would say for a recommendation, make sure your tools can integrate, make sure you can have central authentication, like bounce them all off 365 or something like that. And then I guess make sure you need the tools, make sure you know how they work. Don't have a million tools, just have a few tools that you're really good at, and you can get most of what you need done. So that'd be my recommendation.
How about you, Elliot?
I really second what Dan says. The more tools you have are the more doors to your network. It's really, keep the KISS philosophy. Keep it simple, stupid. Just use what you need. Make sure they're secure and updated, because that's the key. You can have as many tools as you want. If they're not updated, you're just creating a backdoor for any hacker, especially for tools that are hitting your network or hitting your core infrastructure.
Jonathan, is tool sprawl an issue for you guys?
Oh yeah, especially across multiple brands. I think one of the best things to do is to create sort of a team, a committee, if you will, that sort of votes on. Here's out maybe a sales pitch on a new thing, and then can really collaborate and figure out, do we already pay for something that does this mostly, or do we really need this before we move forward with it? Automotive to me feels like it's pretty far behind technology wise in terms of like dealership resources. So we like to have like 20 different tools that all do the same thing. And I'm basically trying to say to the group, if we can't use an identity provider like M365 or Google, which we pay for both, believe it or not, we have email in Google and we use M365 with Entra to manage our fleet of laptops and workstations and servers. If we can't authenticate with one of those, like, maybe we just shouldn't use it, because it's just another login, another password, another thing for the end user to have to bookmark and So we try to basically use that as a litmus test. So we've got a committee to decide whether we need it or not, and then we try to make sure that we're authenticating through. We don't have Okta yet, but I do, I see the reason for having that. But some kind of way to really federate and create an experience for your end user that's easy, and they don't have to have 50 different passwords.
Okay, my next question, I want to start with Dan. How do you balance? I'm going to be diplomatic here. Let's say, how do you balance executive demands for innovation with the reality of limited IT resources?
I think that's a really good question. I think executives, they try to stay plugged in, right? They're visionaries. They try to stay plugged into the market that you're in, and they come up with new ideas all the time. So I guess my main tool for that is education, right? If they say you need to stop everything you're doing and do this thing, well, then I'll say, okay, I'm here to serve the company if that's what you want, but here's what will fall off the list or what won't get done. And if you want both things, which, sometimes they want both things, then you say, okay, this is what it would cost to bring in another FTE or to bring in a consultant, or just arm them with information and be flexible. And usually they'll eventually get to the best decision, right? But they need more information than they have usually.
Yeah, that's very diplomatic too. Elliot, how about you? Do you face this issue?
John, I was hoping you were going to go there. Because that's definitely it's a sticky spot. Again, IT, you try to keep everybody happy. You want everybody to communicate with you. Again, that's how you find out what's happening in the field. That's what you have happy management. You don't want to get cut out. Oh, he's the guy that always says no. But again, there has to be that happy balance. Again, security is obviously paramount, and its communication is the key for these types of things. Keep both sides talking, and try to keep your 2 cents, down the middle.
Same question for you, Jonathan.
Yeah, I think one of the first things I learned when I got into this role was how I can actually be sold on something. And so, I have to be cognizant of that. And so what I do is I always try to, say I just really love something that, I want to provide for the company, or I even get, a request from one of our leadership team to add something, I always bring back a good, better, best. And usually if I provide a good, better, best option, we can come to an understanding of like, yes, we do want to invest because, best is always going to likely cost more. Or maybe better is okay, and we explain the pros and cons of each one quickly. Nobody has a lot of time, right? And that usually helps me suffice pretty much every demand that or every request that I would have.
So vendor lock-in, I've started this question with, do you have a problem with vendor lock-in? Well, vendor lock-in is an issue for everybody, but maybe start with you, Dan. How do you deal with that, that issue? And does it come up, and how often? What do you do?
Yeah, it comes up, I'd say at least twice a year when you're budgeting, right? And when there's contract renewal. Those are the two times it comes up. I guess kind of along the lines of what Jonathan was saying, every year, the vendor I have for this tool, I'll look at, okay, what's the market? What are the top 3 vendors for that tool? What do they cost roughly? What am I paying? Do a comparison just like it would be bringing in a new tool. Redo that comparison at least once a year to make sure that, you're not paying twice, 4 times what the market bears anymore. And you can't, get soft or too comfortable with a vendor because sometimes their development cycle slows down, right? They're not making new features or making it fit the threats for today. So you do have to stay on top of that.
Elliot, how about you?
So very similar to what both Jonathan and Dan are saying is, anytime we're looking at a tool, or even when it comes to renewal, we're always looking at least 3 competitors to every tool we have. And honestly, usually I do 2 rounds. I'll hear all the sales reps, because again, we all know salespeople are salespeople. But again, you always have to learn from everybody and pick up, what's new on everybody's end. And then go back to the second, usually on the second round, or as we narrow it down, I'll ask the same questions over, or say, listen, this tool, I'll be open. We looked at this in this tool. This is what they do. What do you do about it? And again, there's no one set of tools in anything. And again, part of keeping current and keeping up with the latest IT threats is knowing what's out there and keeping your vendors honest.
Jonathan, how about you?
I think that, first of all, when I get emails for a new product, a new something that someone says I can't live without, first I try to figure out, like, what are they offering me? I've had people offer me $500 for 30 minutes of my time. I'm like, this has got to be terrible. Like, if you're having to offer me $500 to sit down with me, and you're going to be like the hardest salesperson I've ever talked to. So I'm very wary of that. But I do constantly try to, at least once a week, sit down with someone with an emerging technology, something I don't know anything about, and listen. And I think Dan mentioned it earlier. As an IT director or somebody who's a leader in IT, your job is to have solutions, and multiple solutions for everything at all times, and kind of covering yourself, if you will. And so I definitely think that I can't get stuck in my ways. I have to listen. I have to take these sales calls every once in a while. But I don't want anything in return. That is like my litmus test for taking a sales call is I don't want to kick back. I don't want to, I don't want a free cruise or anything else. I just want to hear about your product, and it should sell itself, and that should be good enough.
Okay, my last question for you guys before we get to the Q&A. I don't always ask this question, but talking to you guys is exhausting. So I got to ask, how do you prevent burnout among your IT team, especially with increasing demands? Maybe start with Jonathan.
I think for us, first of all, we have a couple of extracurricular activities. The team has a book club that we do to make sure that everybody's kind of growing, and it's not always about IT, so it's a little bit different. We have a fairly good PTO policy here to make sure people are taking vacations and getting away from it all. We promote education here, and what that means is I come from the MSP world where it was kind of like, if you want to go get a cert, good for you. But here we actually financially give bonuses and raises based on the certs that people will take and pass. And we even go to the point of paying for the certification. So if someone is currently like an IT support person, but they're wanting to get more into networking, we can facilitate some certifications that give them a little bit broader knowledge about something they're interested in versus them just burning out on that, IT support kind of role that they're in. And hopefully, that works. I mean, hopefully that's enough.
How about you, Elliot? Is burnout an issue?
Burnout's an issue everywhere. I definitely encourage my team. I try to rotate, like, who's focusing on just, whether it's break and fix tickets versus projects, just to change it up a little bit. We have 30 sites. I try to encourage my team to go out to the different sites, meet the people that we're servicing, which also just changes, the atmosphere. It puts a face to the ticket or a face to the name, which, changes the whole atmosphere. Just getting out of the office a little bit, sitting in one place is definitely not healthy in the IT space.
Dan, do you have to deal with burnout?
Oh yeah, for sure. We try to hold our engineers to roughly an 8 to 5 day. That doesn't always work for IT, right? So we'll offer comp time if they have to work after hours, that sort of thing. And then, I do weekly check-ins, right, to see how people are doing, like to see if they're burning out or getting jittery or whatever. And then, like Jonathan was saying too, we do focus on education and not just technical education. Like I require everybody to get a soft skills training every year. Like IT people aren't always the best, talking to people. So you got to sharpen those skills too, intentionally.
Well, guys, that's all the questions I've got for you. Let's get to some questions from our attendees. We have a bunch. Remember, you guys, you can type your questions into the Q&A box at any time. We'll do our best to get to all of them. Let's start with this one from Al, who's wondering when budgets are tight, what IT investments are non-negotiable for your organization? Start with Jonathan.
For me, people are, and I know it's like everybody might say people, right? But the right amount of people and the right people are non-negotiable in terms of tech stack. You know, pretty much everything that's required by the FTC. I wanted a strong ticketing system for communication and remote support. So something like that is absolutely like you can't do our job without being able to remote in quickly and solve some of these simple things or check out a potential threat. So Syncro is kind of filling that role for us right now. And then just so embarrassing to say, but when I got here, the passwords for all of our main systems were in a Google Sheet. And I swore at that moment that we would never not have an encrypted password vault. So we use Bitwarden for that. And so that is a non-negotiable for me. And no matter what, we're going to have those things, the right people and the organizational tools and the passwords.
Elliot, what IT investments are non-negotiable at Medrite?
Again, having the right team, as Jonathan pointed out, is definitely very true. In our case, we are housing people's information. People are trusting us with their information. Having the security, levels in place and making sure we're compliant is definitely key. That's the key for our business.
Dan?
Yeah, I'd say, people first for sure. And then protection. And after that, recoverability. We probably pay, more than average for a good backup system, but you don't want to be in the spot where when you have trouble, there's nothing to fall back on too. So those are my non-negotiables.
So I got one here from William who's wondering, what's the best way to avoid budget overshoot? Jonathan?
Oh man, I've actually gotten in trouble for missing budgets a few times. I always over budget. I had somebody wanted a security camera recently, and I think it's a $1,200 camera, and I just told him it's going to be over $2,000, because quite frankly, if he's not willing to spend $2,000 and it comes out to $1,400, if I tell him $1,200 and it comes out to $1,400, he's going to be upset. So it's kind of like a over promise, over deliver and under promise kind of situation. But I have found in my time here as an IT director that I have a great passion for negotiation. A really simple example of this was I had a server that was expiring. The service on it was expiring in a few months, and Dell sent me an automated quote. It was like $12,000, and I replied just kind of like a little bit rudely and was like, my budget's $2,400 for this, and they were like, "Can you do 3?" And I was like, "Sure, yeah, we'll do 3." And I can send you the email where it went from 12,000 to 3,000 just by asking. So I've been teaching my team, like, with your vendors, like, you're spending someone else's money. Don't be afraid to just ask for a discount. Just ask for something to be cheaper, because sometimes you can get it for a lot less than whatever retail is.
Elliot?
I think one of the big things is just negotiate well and always get multiple quotes. The same product is available multiple places. I work with a great team of vendors, but again, I'm not scared to bring in another vendor if I need to. Listen, we know we're up against tariffs, which is just going to raise everybody's prices. These are things we need to plan in advance for. We're so early in the year, who knows what the rest of the year is going to bring.
Right. How about you, Dan?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of things said already here. Give yourself some padding and do negotiation. The other thing that I like to do is set aside a little bit for unplanned. Like, people are going to come up with projects in the course of a year that you have not planned for. So set aside something for that so that your budget's not overrun.
So I've got one here from Lynn, who's a regular attendee. Hi, Lynn. Wondering, this is kind of a big question. How do you prioritize the growing number of vulnerabilities across different IT systems, especially in a hybrid or multi-cloud environment? They always ask the big questions. Maybe go with Jonathan, start with that one. How do you prioritize the growing number of vulnerabilities across different IT systems, especially in a hybrid or multi-cloud environment?
Yeah, so I think my two biggest priorities are always customer data, because I'm told that that's a priority by the government, and then production level systems, right? Any kind of system that would prevent us from providing our services to our customers. We're retail establishments, right? So if we can't either sell you a car, service, or parts, or finance, then we're not able to make income as a business. So I always prioritize those systems first. There's a lot of systems, for instance, I mentioned security cameras. We don't even we don't really consider that a production level system, right? Because a security camera is great to have, but if it stops working, we can fix it and you can still buy a car. And so we customer data is first, and in automotive we have physical and digital safeguards. So when you go to buy a car, you're going to fill out a bunch of paperwork, and all of those paper documents that you sign and have to have in your hand currently, hopefully we go paper free soon, those are dangerous. They have your information on them. So we want to make sure that we're prioritizing the physical systems, like meaning shred bins and things that are not digital at all, because those, again, are customer data related.
Elliot?
I echo actually what Jonathan said. Again, we're trusted with patients' information. And again, if people are not going to come in, we can't keep the lights on. If our systems get compromised, we can't see our patients. So that really goes against what we're here for. So those definitely my priorities.
Dan?
Yeah, I guess I try to mix in a little bit of automation here too. We have internal, external scanning, and any vulnerabilities that are found, they're scored, right? They're scoring systems for these issues. So that's probably how we assess the vulnerabilities. But as far as assessing the risk, number one, we have to produce a product, and then we have to be able to make money, take money in, and pay money out, right? Those are the very basic things for having a business. So those are the top level priorities for us, for sure.
Okay, this one is from Perry, who's wondering, how do you collaborate across other departments to meet your goals? Strategies for interdepartment collaboration. Maybe Jonathan first.
Well, I've actually, it's awesome that Syncro is a sponsor of this, because I've actually been spending a lot of time talking to Syncro about this. We need to be able to, as an IT department, communicate with our other support teams across our corporate group. And so communication for me, and being able to really help from the top down lead those leaders of those teams in the different efforts that we're making to be more secure is 100%. If I have anybody sitting at my corporate leadership table that doesn't think that cybersecurity threats are real, that thinks that we're using scare tactics or we're wasting money on things like Falcon, then I'm probably not going to be able to do my job correctly. And so I think it's really important that the leaders of those teams and those departments are on board, and no, they don't need to know everything, but yes, they need to trust you, and they need to trust you a lot.
Elliot, same question.
Yeah, communication is definitely the key. Like getting out there, going to your sites, in my case, and just talking to the subject matter experts on certain things, and just getting everybody on board is definitely the key.
Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, I guess when we have projects that span departments, we definitely you have a kickoff. You bring everybody together the best you can in person, a few virtual, and have people ask their questions, explain everything as best you can. Yeah, that's been the best way for us to work interdepartmentally, for sure.
I think we're about out of time. Maybe I'll squeeze in this one last question real quick. How do you balance employee? This is from Perry, who's also wondering, how do you balance employee demands and executive expectations? Sort of the reverse of that other question I asked. Maybe start with Jonathan.
Oh, that's a tough one. And what's a good example of an employee demand? I don't know. I mean, these days, you just kind of, as an employee, you either accept the things of your industry or you don't. I teach a cyber scams class here at the group, and I've had to tell some guys that have been in automotive for 30, 40 years. They've been selling cars as long as I've been alive. You're either wanting to keep doing this, or you're wanting to go out of this industry, because we are now moderated by the federal government. There is no easy way out. There's no way around it or a gray area. It's very much we're going to be secure. We're not going to get fined, And so luckily we don't have a ton of employee employee demands. But anytime I can say yes to an employee, it's a win for me. So if they ask for something specific and I can say, absolutely, we'll provide that for you, I like that. And then executive expectations, I mean, that's just stress. That's how I manage it. And it's just the stress that I have is my, my bosses and what they expect of me, and just always asking them for more feedback and more communication around what it is exactly that my current job roles, entail.
Elliot, how do you handle that?
Again, it's a tough position to be in. You always obviously try to keep everybody happy, but at the end of the day, it's a business goal that you have to keep in mind. And keeping, in our line, which means keeping the business secure. Sometimes saying no is the key.
Sometimes saying no. Dan, how are things at Nextern?
Well, I think things in general are pretty good. For this question specifically, we get requests from the executive team, and then I have, probably in the last week, I've heard from employees saying, this is the kind of work that I would like to do. And so you kind of, as the IT management, right, you have to hear what projects are coming and hear what work people do and try to match those things up, right? And if they're too far out of alignment, then usually what I'll do, I'll go back to the employee and say, this is the type of work we have for you to do, and I'll leave it up to you. Do you want to do this work, or would you rather be doing something else, a different job, a different company even? And I'm not going to force anybody to do anything, but I'm going to make it very clear what the expectations are so they can decide.
Well, guys, that's all the time we have for this Tech Talk. What keeps MSPs up at night, addressing key risks and building resilience? Thanks so much to Jonathan Holt, Elliot Adler, and Dan Meserly, and many, many thanks to the guys at Syncro for making this conversation possible. We couldn't have done it without them. Guys, this was fantastic. Thanks so much. And thanks to all the attendees, and everyone have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.